Welcome to the Better Buildings, Better Society podcast. Twice a month, we interview interesting individuals and get insight into what they think makes buildings better members of society. Subscribe to our podcast and share with your friends. Hi, I'm Stephen Forster, founder and principal of DMA Engineering. My passion lies in the built environment and in the mechanical systems that keep buildings running at their optimum efficiency, while at the same time provide the best possible health and comfort to their occupants. In this way, DMA is absolutely committed to making buildings better members of society. This podcast focuses on energy efficiency through the eyes and experience of building industry professionals. Together with my guest, I will lead all of us on an exploration of how to build better energy efficiency buildings, how to save our clients time and money, and offer practical advice for those interested in the built environment. Join me, a mechanical engineer, outdoor enthusiast, and green advocate as I interview guests with leading edge ideas for creating better buildings and a better society. Hello again, I'm Stephen Forster, principal of DMA Engineering. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Better Buildings, Better Society. This week we have Erin Elston, project architect at TKP Architects here in Golden, Colorado. She is an expert in this field and recently won Colorado Care Awards for Best Remodel. Erin excels at translating her clients' needs and wish list into warm, inviting homes. Erin is also an active board member of the HBA Custom Home Builder and Remodel Council. We are excited to be hosting Erin and thrilled to explore more about how this industry can make buildings better members of society. With that, it is our privilege to welcome Erin to the show and learn more about what inspires her in this industry. So how are you doing this morning, Erin?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Stephen. I'm excited to be here with you.
Well, thanks for joining. I know you invited us to be part of the HBA electrification of Denver. So it's great that we can reciprocate and have you on our show. So if you really,
it is.
Yeah, that's great. So just give us a little bit more background about the work you do at TKP. What got you into architecture? Just a little bit more information about you.
I'll try and do the abbreviated version of that.
Take as much time as you want as you feel that it's important.
So TKP, we primarily do custom high-end residential and remodels. We do a little bit of commercial in there. We've done a few country clubs, high-end auto body shops, some kind of random things in there. But for the most part, we focus on residential. And in terms of what landed me here, part was fate. In high school, I did a wonderful fine arts magnet program, which I loved. But my senior year, I had a teacher who I didn't really get along with. So I actually went into engineering in college instead. And then I was like, designing beam sizes is not my thing. And I just happened to have to walk from the engineering buildings through the architecture building to get to the dorms. And there was a gallery of all these architectural renderings one day that I stopped and I just stood there and I was like, this is what I need to be doing. And the next day I made an appointment and I switched my major.
And I think that's kind of architecture in a nutshell, right? It's a little bit of blend of art and a little bit of a blend of engineering.
Yep.
In a nutshell, that's what it is. So I think that's really cool. You kind of took a path to get there. It's always interesting how a teacher can influence our decisions, right?
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah, how that happens in our lives at a very impressionable age. So that's cool.
There was slight tangent, but same instructor, different student year ahead of me, went into fisheries from fine art. And so we kind of commiserated on the whole experience after the fact. So anyway, sorry, just thought that was funny.
Yeah. So how many people actually stayed in fine arts after that instructor, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I guess with that blend, has it been great? I mean, do you feel like it plays on both your strengths?
Yes, I do, actually. And it's really interesting to see that gamut of where people's strengths are and how people's brains work and who's more like structurally and technically oriented versus who's more artistic and doing renderings. And it's really interesting to see that range in the field.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, there is even in engineering, right? We have different types of engineers. Some are very, can dig data. Some, like just to solve the problem and move on. There's all those different types that we see in engineering. So yeah, I could definitely see how that can happen in architecture as well. So a little bit on the so what got you into residential buildings? Why residential buildings? Why not the big, high-rise commercial buildings? What inspires you about commercial or residential buildings?
Well, I think there's a little more instant gratification with residential. I also feel like there's more feedback. There's more to work from because you're working for a specific client and their specific needs. With some of the larger commercial projects, you can be on those projects for years and years and years and years. And, in residential, you can be on a project for 5 months. You can be on it for a year and a half. You typically have multiple projects going. So I just feel like there's more variety and there's more feedback from the client at a faster pace in residential. And I tend to feed on that. So I get a lot of appreciation from working with clients on their personal homes.
Yeah, typically people are a lot more passionate about the home than they are about a commercial building. If they're especially if they're just looking at it as an asset to hold, right? They don't have that emotional attachment that we see in the, in the residential world. Yeah.
It's much more personal in residential.
Yeah, for sure. So what's the biggest challenge facing your work right now?
Well, I'm certain that there's quite a few people that are kind of running into this, but certainly timelines and just sheer quantity of work. COVID created a very strange situation for us, and everyone's trying to evolve with that. The building departments, the builders. So there's a lot of people who are wanting to modify their homes or build new homes. They're moving around the country. And we're having issues with lead times and costs and trying to keep up with that. So I know everybody is talking about that, and I wish I could come up with a more interesting answer. But at this point in time, that is the answer to that question.
Yeah, so that's the immediate thing. Thinking a little bit, taking the crystal ball, what do you think is the 3 to 5 to 10 year? What's the challenge that you see coming down the pipe?
I think the way we build is going to change as we start to institute the new building codes with energy efficiency and what we're seeing, obviously with climate change, we need to do that. But with what is going to be required in terms of insulation in the buildings and how they function, it's going to change how we build, and we're going to need to evolve with that. And I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing that we see in the next 3 to 5 years. The
insulation schemes that have evolved, right? And that is, like you mentioned, it's going to get a lot more complicated. There's going to be a lot more with that as we go forward. It used to, the biggest thing used to be to keep water out of a building. Now it's going to keep water out of a building and keep the energy in. So it's going to be another thing another layer that's going to be added to the whole construction of the building.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be an exciting time. Do you think it's going to be exciting, or are you like, oh, geez, more detailing, or what?
I'm excited for it. I think there will certainly be some pushback, and there will be some creative thinking that we need to, everybody's going to need to put their thinking caps on to really work out how we build homes. Our exterior walls thicker? If we have more insulation on the outside of the wall in order to meet continuous insulation, how are we attaching our exterior materials to the wall? We're going to be trying to really figure out those nitty-gritty pieces. But I also think that there's an interesting conundrum with having houses that are so tight and the amount of toxic air that kind of can build up inside of them. So I can see a movement toward, cleaner interior. We're there, we're moving there, we're already there, but I can see people becoming more aware and becoming educated and asking for those items, because our houses don't typically, because they're so tight, they're not breathing the way that older homes do. And so there's certainly a trickle effect that we're going to see with that too.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's coming down to ERVs will be the norm. ERVs or HRVs will be the norm in design as we go forward. Yep. And then enhance filtration on those, to keep the IAQ down. And then the other side of the tighter homes that we see is noise. Right now, we don't have as much white noise from the exterior. Now, the interior noise, that noise is just the littlest things can become nuisance now. And that's another thing that we're starting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do most people misunderstand about your field of work?
I think that's an interesting question. I would have to say, for some reason, experience and design is not as tangible to some people. And so I think some folks struggle with having an idea of what we do during our day and what it takes to actually work out those details and move something from in our brains and from a conversation with a client to something that is a 2D or a 3D creation on the computer that can be used to actually build a structure.
Yeah, I mean, do you find that most of your clients, is this their first project that they're getting into or third project? I mean, that has a lot to do with where the client is in their home remodel or home building journey, right?
Right. There's a lot of education that I think happens in the process too.
Yeah, exactly. And even though they may have built the home in the past, things have changed. Like we just mentioned the energy codes, right? So some of the things that we have to explain to them, well, we can't really do that anymore, or we could do it, but it has to be done like this. So those type of things are definitely things that go into that client education piece.
Yes. And it's exciting and it's interesting. Sometimes it's a little frustrating. For the most part, people understand. I think with the architecture degree, there probably should have been a psych degree minor with it too. When you're kind of dealing with the husband-wife dynamic where they want different things. So yeah, there's a few challenges in there.
You're almost playing marriage counselor at some point, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
Trying to satisfy two differing needs.
Yeah. Sometimes we have to do the, okay, so so-and-so wanted this. So I think maybe there should be a little give and take on this piece here. Yeah, sometimes it's interesting, but most people have a really good sense of humor about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, that is. I haven't heard that question. I have not heard that answer before, and that really, I'm like, oh yeah, I could definitely see how that could play out. So that's awesome. So how does your work contribute or influence better buildings?
Well, I think certainly on the personal level, we're doing individual homes, and so there are multiple levels to that. But the first one is creating a home that functions for the homeowner who's living in it, and meeting their individual needs. We usually have a pretty lengthy programming meeting where we ask some very personal questions. And I'd say that's probably first and foremost. And then, second to that is where is the property that this is being built? Are there certain massings in the neighborhood? Are we being sensitive to those massings in the neighborhood? Are we being sensitive to the land that the building is sitting on? So I think there's definitely multiple facets to that, and we try and be as sensitive as possible to those things and meeting the requirements of the homeowner.
Yeah, so I think always the most important thing is it serves its occupants, right? That's what that's a building's number one priority, is to serve its occupants, and making sure we get that right on residential buildings can be a challenge.
Yes.
For what you mentioned before, there can be differing ideas. What the neighborhood can handle, right? I think that's a very good perspective. What can the neighborhood actually do to support that vision? Is it just going to be something that just stands out and, well, what's that, right? Or is it just fit and go, yeah, that looks great. So I think those are two very, very highly things that are important that at the basis of it all. So I think that's great. That's awesome. So what do you wish you had known when you first started in the industry? I mean, we always look back and go, oh, yeah, if I'd have known that when, what could you take back with you?
I definitely would have gotten that psychology minor. It's interesting, after being in the field for a while, you kind of realize how much movies glamorize architects. And yeah, I think it's kind of interesting what the assumption people make is about what we kind of do. And so when we have interns come in to the office, or if we have like a high school student come shadow for a day, I try and do just a little bit of a reality check. It's kind of like, it's not the highest paying job there is. There is a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of creativity. And there's definitely a filtration system at the beginning, where people have to figure out if it is for them or if it's not. But if it is, you're a lifer. You love it. So I think having that reality check in the beginning is important because it's a decent amount of education. And also you have to do an internship and put time in before you can even test to get your license. So it's involved.
Yeah. And what is the licensing requirement for architects is you have to do 4 years understudy right before you can even take the test or something? It
depends on the degree that you have. It ranges anywhere from about 2.5 years and up. So if you have a 4-year degree and a master's, then you have 3 years or so of internship that you have to do. If you have a 5-year professional degree, then it's 3 years. If you have a 4-year degree, then I think it's 5 or 6 years that you have to do. And if you don't have a degree in architecture, it goes up from there. And then it kind of depends on the state in terms of what they allow. Some of it, you do 10 years of experience, and then you can test for your license. So it really varies depending on the situation.
Yeah. And then that internship in the beginning is definitely a lot of work, right? Yeah. So coming out of school. Yeah.
Yep. You have to log all your hours and specifically what you're doing. So you commit, let's put it that way.
So, I mean, when you go back and you talk to your old clients that you've done at building, what do they tell you the most important part of their building is? I mean, what's a common theme that you kind of hear when you're talking to older clients about, the building, the design? What did they find out was the most important to them at the end of the day? Kind of a little bit of a hindsight thing that you're taking with you, going, okay, based upon that knowledge, what is it? For us, it's always where's the mechanical room in the building, because there's those little noises that can pop up. So we're very sensitive. We've heard from 2 clients in the past of like, yeah, the mechanical room should have been put over here, right? So now that's always one thing. Where's the mechanical room and what's the sensitivity? So what's something that you've taken with you that you've heard in the last couple of years?
God, that's so specific to each client. But there is typically a moment, when things are coming into finishes and they've been framed, they can see the views out of the windows. They're starting to see the massing of the rooms. And they're like, oh, this is what you were talking about. This is, or they want something, but they have no idea how to see it in their head or to imagine it and to physically see it starting to form in front of them. I think there's definitely an aha moment there when they're like, oh, yeah, this is exactly what we were looking for. So along those lines, I know at TKP, you guys use Revit and then so the 3D models. Do you think that has been a big help, or do you think actual physical models has helped? And then what's the gap between the actual 3D model, even going down to the rendering, to actually when they actually walk in the room in person and see it? How big a leap is that from those two? I think Revit has aided drastically in terms of helping people see in 3D compared to the 2D drawings that we had done previously. I think it's leaps and bounds above even the physical models that we used to do of houses. And so I think it's a huge aid in terms of being able to have discussions with clients and show them even interior perspective of rooms, that kind of thing. But in terms of like being able to frame views from a house, that's what you see when it's framed and on site and they're standing there. So there is still, you don't get to see all of it in Revit, but it is a huge help for folks that don't see in 3D. And being able to see in 3D is a skill. It is a really big skill that not many people have, and it's one that can take years to be developed for people who are in the field. So Revit is a great tool for that. And the renderings, we've started using Lumion in our office. We've got a couple of people who are just amazing with Lumion. And so they can do interior perspectives with finishes and lighting. And that really helps people see what the rooms are going to feel like.
What is that software, Lumion?
Lumion.
Lumion, is it a plugin for Revit or is it a standalone?
It's a standalone, but you can import from Revit and then do the rendering using those files.
Oh yeah, I've never heard of that. That's a new one that I've never heard of it. So you can do like lighting, interior. It's more based for interior and lighting perspectives from there.
You can do interior and exterior on it. It's really pretty amazing what some of the renderings look like.
Wow. Give you that life touch feel, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that comes back to what we were saying, right? You know, it's got to serve the occupants so we could show them and then how it's going to fit into the neighborhood. It feeds those type of things before it's actually built is a big aid in bringing about, you know, an awesome building.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so physical models, is physical models part of the things you do anymore or not really?
No, Revit's kind of taken over. So being able to do several even exterior perspective images for like homeowners associations, we're able to do that instead of having to build a physical model.
Yeah. Any 3D printing? Has TKP taken on 3D printing of some stuff?
There was a short period between going from 2D AutoCAD and hand-built models to Revit, where we did do a few 3D models. And I would say those were kind of put more in the hand-built, physical model category. I think Revit gives us even more. Revit and rendering programs give us even more possibilities in terms of being able to show what can be done with a building.
So on the software front, how big a role do you think software will have to play as we're taking the evolution of buildings, right? We're getting more complicated assemblies. How much of the actual design software, such as a Revit, will play in doing that? Do you think there'll be some standard, wall assemblies that can be dropped in to help on some of that detailing? Do you think that software will have a play? Do you think there's a role for maybe possibly even, a plug-in that you can load in certain details? What do you think will be the issue with software and the role it'll play?
I think absolutely that the advancement of the software is going to help. I think right now, in terms of what I see for us, it makes it a little faster for us to draft and be able to show that 3D piece to clients. There is one thing, though, that you have to be careful with the 3D software. You can't draw something that can't be built. So you still need the education and the knowledge base to know that something's going to work or not. And so you have to kind of be careful with that element of it. But in terms of a communication tool between you and your clients, and even between, your structural and your mechanical engineers, and being able to convey how much space is, in the house for beams and trunk lines and all the different systems that we have to integrate. I think that evolution is going to continue and really help the industry.
Yeah, I mean, we do some Revit here as well. And it's been, it is a help to figure out some of the clearance issues, outline where things need to be, where we need more room and things. So from that communication tool, it's definitely a big help in that world. Much like you, we use a lot of outside programs to do a lot of the work. And I think that'll continue as well. So it's just going to be an interesting, as we go forward with making, the installation schemes and all those, it's going to be interesting to see how that all pans out. We got standards over here. You got the passive house standards, these standards code, how that's all going to get rolled into software and what that'll play.
Yep.
Yeah. So what are you currently researching or has struck your curiosity?
Right now it's how to get through Denver permitting.
I hear you.
We also have a gal in our office who was going through the passive house courses with EMU, which I think is really interesting. And she's actually working on a rammed earth house. So we've kind of been having little conversations in the office about that. So I think it's really interesting to look at different forms of construction, and greener construction. And I think for me personally, I think the whole, how do you solve that clean inner air piece, for homes, is a big thing. I feel like there's so many things that are coming up on the horizon that are just going to require a lot of research and thinking, which I think is a really interesting challenge. So I'm looking forward to that.
And so do you think COVID has driven a lot of that's going on, the green and the indoor air quality? Do you think COVID's doing that? Or do you think it's just a natural progression that maybe COVID accelerated?
I think it's a natural progression that COVID accelerated. I think that we're seeing more cancers in younger people, and a lot of that is likely environmental. And so we're becoming more cognizant of what's in our air, what's in our water, just everything that's around us. And part of that is, our paints, our adhesives, our furniture, all of those elements. And I think as we become more and more aware of that, we're moving toward the consumer driving the desire for those things.
And is a lot of your homeowners right now saying, hey, we want, we have sensitivities to X, Y, and Z, and they're already starting to drive that? Or are you more coming to the table and say, have you considered this?
I think right now there's a minority of clients who are aware of that. We've done one house in the past that actually did not get built for someone who had chemical sensitivities that we had to think about. But I think educating clients to know that is a choice, especially with the tighter homes, is definitely, I think, something we're going to move toward at a faster rate.
Yeah. So following kind of along that, I mean, is that the direction you would like to see the industry take in the next few years? Are you like, yeah, that's the way it has to go? Code's driving it, right? We're seeing the codes coming along that are driving it, but going the passive house, you mentioned that, seeing people just actually use passive house as the standard and go above and beyond code. Do you think that's where and then the consumer requesting that stuff? Do you think that as the consumer, as things become more mainstream in those areas and more people know that it's there, is your feel that the consumer is definitely going to be driving those conversations to make it happen?
I think they will. I think in the past, people have been highly interested in it, but it wasn't mainstream yet. And there was a little bit of pushback from builders in terms of trying to construct in a new way, and how to think about that. And I get that, and you've been doing something one way for 20 or 30 years and how that goes together. You really have to put on your thinking cap and think about how to alter some of those details. But for the consumer, in the past, they also had to think about the cost ramifications. And so a lot of times we would have clients come in who were gung-ho and about doing more green building. And then they find out what the cost attachment is to those elements, and they backed off. And so I'm hoping that it really becomes more of a standard, because I think we should all be allowed to lead, healthy lives and to have homes that make us comfortable and safe.
Yeah, and then along with the builders, right? The architect is definitely the front line with the builder. I mean, that's the immediate interface. Typically, is the builder and the architect. And as we are rolling out new technologies, and they are moving fast. I mean, just in the heat pump technologies that are coming along, that's moving fast. The envelope schemes that we used to do. I mean, everybody closed cell foam insulation, you were doing that, and that was like the cutting edge. And now we do, like you mentioned earlier, we do exterior insulation, and how all those details come along. And, when we do an energy model, we'll say, if you do this type of model, this is the load, and it comes down to the builder, and that interface is critical. And as we're releasing so much more new information, the builders, they're trying to manage a budget, they're trying to manage timelines, and then they're managing new ways of doing it. What do you think the industry could do as a whole to help out the builders adapt as quickly, right? Because we're dealing with electrons most of the time. So for us, we can adapt quick, but they actually got to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think while you're proposing a new code or a new type of building methodology, that there should be solutions coming with it. So if you're proposing a wall, needs to, in terms of standard fiberglass batt insulation, it would have to be a 2x8 wall, or you're going to have, 3 to 5 inches of continuous insulation on the exterior of the wall. How do you connect your exterior materials? If you're proposing that, think about how that actually changes the building details and offer solutions with that. I think that would help builders hugely, to say, hey, here's an alternative for how you're going to add masonry on the outside of 3 inches of continuous foam insulation, because that's a big challenge.
Yeah, and we see that as well, and we're big fans of the exterior continuous insulation. It helps out on all the thermal breaks and all those type of things. So we're big fans of that. And again, we ran into that multiple times where they're putting stone on a building. Do we do a brick ledge, and then we have to do a drainage plane and all those type of details that can come along that add cost and time, right? And then the guys in the field got to understand how to put it all together, and it may be something that they've never seen before. So
exactly,
a lot of challenges there as we go forward. And I don't know if that's like if having standards that will just help that out, and if the industry is going to be able to flush that out as quick as the codes and what's being demanded is going to happen. When we've done it in the past, 5 years ago, was cutting edge stuff that we were doing, right? And it's still not adopted. So it's like, when is that all going to be finally adopted and understood to be mainstream type things? So I think that's a big challenge that we'll see. So
I agree.
Yeah, people going into the trades they're already craftsmen in themselves, but then they're also going to be like technicians on like insulation scheme. You know what I'm saying? They're going to be like that. They're going to be more advanced on that. So I think it's exciting times for everybody in the industry, myself.
Yeah. To be able to problem solve in the field, I think is going to be a huge skill.
Yeah. And it's not and it can be a teachable skill, but it's not readily teachable, I guess, right? We need more years of internships to help people figure out how to do that. Yeah. Experience. Yep. Yeah. That's exactly what it'll take. It's going to be interesting. So if you had extra money on a project, how would you recommend a client use it?
Oh gosh, that's so specific to each client. I'm not sure I know how to answer that. That would,
well, what's one thing, you wish every project would incorporate, but typically does it mainly due to budget?
I would say detailing always gets cut for budget. And so to be able to really work through transitions of materials and the detailing of those items, that's one piece. I think people like to think about the aesthetic portions of a house more versus the actual infrastructure. And so your mechanical systems, those can be a big upfront cost. And so a lot of times they might be like a geothermal system might be kind of put off to the side to go back to standard, forced air. So I think those are, sorry, my dog is getting a drink.
That's fine.
I'm like, I am not making that strange noise. But I do think those things sometimes get eliminated because of cost.
Yeah, and I think that's that's back to the education of the client, right? Sometimes big infrastructures, like the one-time cost that like you'll never do it, right? You could repaint a room. You may be able to update some fixtures in 5 to 7 years. Easy enough to remodel a bathroom for the most part, right? It's just like if you wanted it like that and you dialed it down. But the big infrastructure stuff, it's like, yeah, it's a one-time deal mainly, right? I mean, we do retrofits and a lot of things, but they're very obtrusive to people's lives when we do those. So yeah, it's all, understanding that. So what's one of your an example of a design mistake or failure you experienced, and what did you learn from it?
We had Karen might kill me for saying this, and this was, I don't know, this wasn't necessarily a mistake on anyone's part. I think it was a surprise by Mother Nature, but we had a house that the roof had gone on and they were getting ready, I believe, to put the windows in, and a huge gust of wind came up a valley and came into the house and popped the roof off the house. And so that was a real eye-opener and a little terrifying in terms of, what a builder really has to think about in terms of order of building events and timing and paying attention to weather and just all the elements that go into successfully building a home.
Yes, and I have 2 horror stories about that when I was framing houses. They weren't on our crew. I worked on one building where a wind gust came through, and it knocked down the trusses on the roof. So I worked on one building where that happened, and it just happened. I had left the project. They were there, and they were doing the back out framing on the trusses, getting everything locked down, and the wind gust came along, and it was just a freak wind gust too, and knocked the roof down. So that's my horror story there. So I'm with you there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what advice would you give someone just starting to consider building, purchasing a thing? If they can't, what's the one thing that you think a client should be thinking about before they get into a remodel or building a new home?
Do your homework and ask lots of questions.
What specific homework? What would you recommend that they do specifically on the homework?
I think, we get calls from people who are thinking about doing a remodel, and reaching out to someone and saying, okay, what do I need to think about? Talking to multiple architects, just start asking questions. If you're talking to the builder, if you're talking to the architect, if you're talking with a friend who just went through it, there is no stupid question. And I don't think you can ask enough questions. So I think my tip is don't be afraid to ask and put some time in to do some research and give yourself time to ask those questions. Because a lot of people just think, okay, it's construction. That's the cost I need to think about. And, you're not thinking about your water tap, your sewer line, how long your driveway is, how much that's going to cost, what kind of grading you're going to have to do, the fact that you need a survey before you can even start. You might need a soils test before you can start. And then your builder has fees as well. There's a lot of overall costs to think about in a project. And unless you've done it before, you probably have no idea what those are. So I think just getting on the phone and asking those questions is a really good way to set yourself up for a good experience.
So you like it when a client comes to you, when you finally get a client that they've actually talked to several different architects and gotten different perspectives, and then they've chosen to work with you. Do you find that to be one of the things that's the key to a success? Is that
I think talking to multiple, somebody might shoot me for saying this, but or smack me for saying this. But
You're safe here.
So when we work, if a client comes to us and they don't have a builder yet, we like to refer multiple builders to them so that they have a chance to talk to multiple builders and see how people communicate differently and what things that how they answer their questions and what other pieces of information that they'll bring up to them. And I think the same thing applies to anyone that you're going to be working with, including your architect. I feel like you want to know that you're working with the right person in the right company who's going to communicate well with you and be able to create the home that you want, and to be able to have as good of an experience as possible, because we know construction is a stressful experience. So you want to have the right team members on board with you. And I feel like being able to talk to multiple people really allows you to know that you've done that.
And typically when you're in a project, you like to have the builder involved right away. In your dream world, where do you like to have the general contractor lined up in the process?
I think right after schematic design is a great time. It's difficult to have conversations about something that's not designed yet. You just kind of wave your arms and everybody talks, and they might have a different, vision in their head of what they're talking about. So being able to have an initial design then allows everybody to comment on it. It also gives the builder something more tangible to run initial numbers on. So I feel like just after schematic design is a great time to put your entire team together. Yeah.
And for us, I think when we get to our mechanical designs, right at DD level is when we really like to have a mechanical contractor on board. Mm-hmm. It just solves a lot. You don't put the drawings out and then have to go back and redo a bunch of back work.
No. Yeah. And if we have the builder on board at schematic design, then the engineer can be asking means and methods questions if there's multiple ways to do something. And then whoever the subcontractors are who are doing the mechanical design, who are installing, an HVAC system, we have the ability to reach out to those subcontractors and ask those questions. How big is our trunk line going to be? How much space do I need to allow for that? I think it really helps make all the systems integrate into the house in a much more effective way.
Yeah, having that early collaboration in the design is key. I mean, otherwise everything just goes design build if we don't collaborate in the beginning, right? Because then in the design build they just figure it out in that process. Whereas if we're just plan bid spec, having a team built early is always the most successful, I find. So I agree. I think that's a great step. I think that is probably the one I wish we would do more often than not.
Yes,
I hear you on that one. So what is your favorite building and why?
I'm going to go for favorite or architect, if that's okay.
Sure.
I got to travel when I was in college a little bit, and I would have to say the Art Nouveau, Victor Horta, and Charles Rainey McIntosh buildings really struck me because every part of those buildings were designed, from how the floor tile meets the wall to how the door handle feels in your hand. The exterior of the homes almost feel like they're alive, especially with Victor Horta's work. So we don't build that way anymore. And it's just a stunning design, entity to be able to see and touch and walk through.
Why don't you think we build that way anymore?
It would be very expensive. The craftsmanship that was involved, I think you can find it, but I don't think it's prevalent in the construction industry. And I don't think that people ask for that much detail on the interior of their homes. I think there's just a different mindset toward our homes and construction. And I think that's why it really kind of blows your mind when you walk into a space where every single square inch has been thought about.
Very interesting. I think one takeaway that I see in the work that we do, people will buy the Teslas and the latest EV, which are some of the most technically advanced transportation systems in the world. And then we start talking about the home and bringing technology into the home on not as, not on the same level, but high tech to their homes. And they get back off really quick. And you're like, they accept it more in the transportation in the car versus the home. And it's kind of that same, it's that same transition. They'll accept it in some ways, but not in others. And it's interesting how we've done that. And yeah, you're right. Some of that architecture and the design, the craftsmanship we don't see, especially in some of the older homes here in Denver, just some of that is just phenomenal. So yeah. What is your favorite place and why?
Favorite place? I'd say overseas, the Aran Islands in Ireland, and here in Colorado, I'd say the sand dunes, the Great Sand Dunes. The Aran Islands, they still speak Gaelic. It's steeped in tradition. It's just kind of a magical place to me. More simplicity and you feel like you're walking through history when you're there. And the sand dunes, another place that just seems magical. You're like, these should not be here. But it's amazing what you can find on this planet.
Yeah. Yeah. So biggest lesson you learned in the past year about creating better buildings?
I think having even more of an open dialogue and education with a client. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, I think educating our clients is what we need to do in the industry. That's our biggest thing as professionals that we need to be doing. So
yeah.
So for someone listening and they would like to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
They can check out our website. We're tkparch.com. And my name is Erin Elston. Our phone number is 303-278-8840. We also have a page on House. So you can take a quick peek at what we do and then give us a call.
Sounds great. Well, I really appreciate you being a guest on this podcast. It was a good conversation and good catching up again. And I think a couple things that is a theme, right? Educating our clients is important. That's the biggest thing that we got to do as professionals in it. I like the new perspective that you came about. It's got to serve its occupants and it's got to serve the neighborhood. I think that was, that's important, right? We got to make sure that perspective is going to do both things. And then, it's just the detailing that's going to be coming along with all the things that we're going to be seeing with all the new codes, all the new requirements, plus just trying to make the buildings a lot more energy efficiency is going to be interesting, and how we actually can translate into buildable products, I think is going to be pretty cool. So yeah, thanks again for participating, and want to thank the listeners for listening. And you can find more about this blog post and other blogs at World Wide Web, dma-eng.com. And thanks again.